Hello everyone, and thanks for watching. Um, with the year nearing the end, I'm slowly thinking about what to do next year in terms of my contributions to automation tool called Make, previously Integromat. And I have to say I really love this tool. I like the way it can be used, the interactions on the canvas. Look at this beautiful scenario in front of me. There's a lot you can do and there's a huge potential. But one of the challenges I have been constantly thinking about is related to code versioning. So let me quickly explain what I mean by that. Obviously, everything you do with Make is you use the canvas like it's shown here. You can add new modules, create new connections, and set up or build new automations, and it's all cool. It works, but then ultimately you don't get to see the source code behind this. What you can do though is you can always export a blueprint, which is a JSON file. And that JSON file you can upload to platforms such as GitHub. So to make things more specific, let me just go to my own GitHub repository and where I store several examples of how Make can be used. One of the examples is how to upload Gmail content onto Google Drive. And here's my blueprint JSON. With Git, I can always use this blame button to see the changes that have been made over time. So for example, if I have a look at this change, I can see that at that particular point in time, I updated the from email address, reshuffled boxes on the canvas, gave them a new position, started to ingest data from a different folder, updated the pattern to search for emails, etc., etc. So this works, and it does give you some level of control. In fact, there is some other contributor who took it to the next level. Benoit, I hope I pronounce his name correctly, built a whole service. You can check his post and what it can do for you. But basically, his service allows you to even more highlight the changes you have made in your scenario. Which is cool, and ultimately that's what you definitely gonna need when working with complex scenario and when you are a team that works with them. However, I was thinking, with complex scenario like this one, it might be difficult to understand the changes that have been made just looking at the JSON file. At the end of the day, the JSON is fairly complex. There's a lot to read. And imagine I had to review someone's changes. And just looking at the JSON, I can't really see if there is some kind of problem with it or not. Oftentimes, it's not simple to just conclude whether that change is valid and whether it can be approved. Or whether there is something wrong with it. That took me to the next idea, which is, can I actually somehow generate this JSON? So this blueprint that's behind all this scenario, or behind my canvas, can I generate it? Can this be generated? And as wild as it sounds, infrastructure as code is something that's been around for a while. There are, platforms such as Google Cloud Platform or Datadog for that allows you to monitor, create graphs and visualization. for your web services. All these platforms, they allow you to create components they use via code. And I was thinking, could I do something like that with Make? And I tried to address this problem a while ago. I didn't quite succeed, but recently I came across an old Integromat API, and I created this website. We can check my previous video where I go in detail about what it is. But basically, I created this website where you can, which lists all of the current Make integrations or modules, and it gives details about each of the modules in a structured way. So, for example, looking at Google Email, which I have here. So, watch emails, for example, is a trigger. If I go to my Make app, I can see the triggers, trigger new email, so labeled as watch emails. This is a trigger. And a trigger is something that obviously it's like initial, is like the initial input into your workflow, and it feeds into a feeder such as iterate attachments. You know, having received a new email, I can now look at the attachments and possibly do something with them, such as, you know, store them on Google Drive. And again, if I go to Make Apps and I have a look at feeders, I can see that feed attachments, aka iterate attachments, indeed is on the list. And that made me think, you know, looking at this structure, could I possibly generate code that would represent, you know, feeders, triggers, actions, and would let me build scenarios using code and generate this JSON here, the blueprint. And I did a quick experiment and had some success with it. So that's what I'm gonna show you next. Let me just go to application. All right, so this is my main class. It's written in Kotlin, but that's less relevant. It could be any other language. What I have here is just like, you know, a JSON library that knows how to work with JSON and how to generate, how to convert Kotlin or Java classes into JSON string. And this here is basically a representation of what I was talking about previously. So the feeders, or a feeder, is now represented by a feeder, particular feeder class. In this case, it's feed attachments, and then it knows to take an input. In this instance, it's a trigger called trigger new email, and that new email can be obviously configured in sync with how it's described here. So it takes some parameters. One of them is an account, which is represented by an account ID. Then you can add some filtering, and you can choose some other option, how many results you would want to fetch in one go, etc., etc. And all of that is represented by this simple, you know, I don't know how to call it, DSL is the usual term, like domain language, but let's say it's like an SDK, development kit. When you can define everything using some simple code, and then ultimately you can generate a new scenario out of it. And once you have the scenario generated, you can output it as string, and then in this case I'm just printing it out. So let's see how it works. So if I just run this example, it gives me this JSON, let me copy it, and let me just go here, reformat it. As you can see, this is not dissimilar from what I could see here, for example. If I look at the blueprint, there's a name, there's this flow, which is a JSON array, and then each of the flows describes one particular module. In this case, I'm starting with a trigger a new email. Similarly here, again, I start with a trigger, give it some parameters, so reference to my my Google account, then the way I wish to search, how many results do I want to look at in one go, which folder to check, etc. And this trigger is connected to the attachment iterator that then automatically knows which field to look at, and it's positioned on the canvas in a certain way. So if I then go to my make scenario and just delete all this, and let's say I import the blueprint using the generated content, it will create a structure for me. Let's have a look at how the modules were generated. So starting with the connection is determined by the account ID I fed into the trigger new email here. Obviously, had I chosen a different ID, it would have resulted into a different connection. Folder inbox, as per my definition. Actually, this is a default. So if I go to the trigger new email, I can see that inbox is chosen by default, but I can still override it. And let's just say, for the sake of the exercise, with folder, I can say, I don't know, sent. Why not? Then there's the simple filter for searching. That's fine. Now, this doesn't really make sense. I probably would rather want to process unread emails as opposed to read emails. So let me change it here. Criteria unseen. And the number of results, in this example, it's 10, which matches what I said here, but let's say I want 5. See if I can see anything more here. Oh yeah, and then the sender email address is displayed here. Let's change that to, let's say, test or acme.com. And let me just regenerate and re-upload the scenario. Before I do a quick check here, yes, that's sourced by the trigger, and that's all I need to know. So that works. These two are linked. Okay. So if I regenerate the scenario, again, copy paste into the scenario JSON, reformat. Now I can see the changes I made. All right. Let me delete this real quick. Delete module. Import. Scenario open, save. Okay. Now, as you can see, I'm now reading from the sent folder, and I'm only dealing with unread emails, and the maximum number of results is 5. And if I show advanced settings, I can even see that my sender email address has changed. Okay, cool. And this still works. Now, obviously, this is just an experiment, but it might be useful. It might be useful for, you know, creating simple scenarios from your code and looking at the resulting JSON, you know, versus this fairly concise piece of code. This code feels somehow easier to review and reason about. So that's one scenario, when you have like a simple scenario with not too many modules and you want to be able somehow define it from within your code. That's what it might be useful for. Now, in terms of building this SDK and, you know, efforts that go into it, obviously there are about 2,000 make integrations, and for me, I wanted to save myself as much of manual work as I possibly could. So bear in mind, this class here, this feed attachment or trigger new email, that's all generated. That's nothing I would write by hand. So if I look at it, it was not generated, you know, it was not crafted by hand. It's a generated code. It's dynamically created out of a schema, a JSON schema I created. So now, again, if I go back to my makeups, I use this structure as an input. Let me show you. So I just save that in a file, and as you can see, it's a long piece of text. It's a long JSON object with a lot of properties, but basically it boils down to actions, triggers, and feeders. That's what I'm interested in, these three. And this on its own would not suffice for me to achieve the goal of generated code. But if I tweak it just a little bit, I can come up with fairly concise JSON schema definitions. These ones I created by hand, just, you know, to experiment and see what I can do. But I'm already working on a schema generator that will do all this work. All this work would do for me for any of the 2,000 modules that there are in Make. So suppose I could generate this JSON schema for any of the applications that they are in Make. You know, any of these. If I look at, imagine you had a way of how to describe, I think that's the best way how to put it, how to describe each and every of these integrations. And then out of that description, imagine you were able to generate an SDK like this that's generated. And then you would be able to piece together a new scenario purely based on code. This do scenario method is something I had to write to be able to make it work. It's an extension method in the Kotlin world, but basically it means, you know, create, you know, take the feed attachments piece, feed it with new email trigger, and then when you're done, please convert it to a scenario. And that code is fairly straightforward. It just knows how to generate a scenario object with some metadata, how to convert these two into modules, and then ultimately that results into the structure, which I can then feed into Make to create a new scenario. All right, so just to wrap it up, this was a quick exercise and experiment how to go beyond basic versioning and actually control how your scenarios are created purely from code. I'm not saying that's something you should always do, but it is definitely something you might sometimes want to do, especially if you are a company, if you adopted Make or any other no-code solution, and then you're looking for ways how to reliably control and version changes you are making into the platform. So that's that. Appreciate your feedback. Let me know what you think. Is this crazy? Is this a crazy idea? Am I totally off? Or is it something you would actually find useful and you would like me to continue working in this direction? Thank you so much for watching, and Happy New Year if it applies to you wherever you are in the world. Have a good one. Bye.